The winds that whipped across the canyon floor below howled like ancient spirits, carrying with them the songs of every warrior who had ever leapt from that precipice. To the Veari, those winds were sacred. They carried away shame, dishonor, and weakness. On the highest ledge stood Lyra. Her tall, slender form trembled against the cold. Her dark carapace, usually sleek and polished in the way of her people, was cracked and dulled with the dust of war. Her deep violet eyes, once sharp, proud, and unyielding, were hollow, reflecting only the abyss below. Her people, the Veari, were bound by a strict code: victory or death. To survive when your squad perished was not a sign of luck or resilience, but of cowardice. And Lyra had survived. Her mind replayed the battle again and again, the screams of her comrades, the thunder of the Karak's plasma bombardment, the stench of blood in the air. Her unit had fought valiantly, standing firm against impossible odds. Yet when the dust settled, when the screams had gone quiet, only Lyra remained. She had not fought to the bitter end. She had not charged into the enemy lines with the blade held high. She had hidden among the corpses, her breath held, her body frozen, while the enemy passed her by. Coward, ghost, disgrace. The words hammered in her skull as surely as if they had been carved there by her ancestors. She had no family now, no clan who would embrace her. To walk into the city would be to face stares of contempt, to hear the whispers of dishonor. Her people had given her only one path forward, the cliff of silence. It was a place reserved for those who bore unbearable shame, a place where the final step was taken not in glory but in surrender. The Veari believed such a fall washed away dishonor, carrying the soul into the wind so that future generations might not bear its stain. Lyra's claws dug into the edge of the stone platform as she leaned forward, the abyss pulling at her. She could already feel the wind tugging at her clothes, as if the cliff itself hungered for her surrender. Tears welled in her eyes, though she despised them. Veari warriors did not cry. But she was no warrior anymore. She whispered the ritual words, her voice breaking. I am unworthy. I return my soul to the winds. May the ancestors forgive me. She took a trembling step forward. Then, don't. The voice cut through the howl of the canyon like a blade through silence. Harsh, steady, and foreign. It was not the sharp hiss of a Veari tongue. It was smooth, deep, human. Her body jerked around instinctively, claws raised. And there he stood, a human male, his silhouette framed in the silver glow of the moons. His uniform was torn and stained, the fabric scorched with the marks of battle. One arm supported his weight on a cane, his leg dragging slightly with each step as he moved toward her. He should not have been there. Humans were outsiders, allies, only by necessity in this war. Yet his brown eyes locked on hers with such unflinching steadiness that she froze where she stood. You don't have to do this, he said again. His words felt alien, not just in language but in meaning. No one had ever said such a thing to her. Among the Veari, her path was already decided. She was expected to jump. To refuse was to spit on her people's traditions. Yet this human, this battered, limping survivor dared to stand in her way. Her voice came out as a hiss. This is not your place, human. Leave me. But he didn't. He kept walking, slowly, carefully, as though he knew any sudden movement might push her over the edge. His gaze never wavered. I've seen too many good soldiers die, he said quietly, his tone not commanding but steady. But I won't stand here and watch one throw their life away. He stood several paces back, his weight resting heavily on his cane. His left leg bore the charred remains of a plasma strike, hastily treated with field medicine. Every step looked painful, yet his expression carried no hint of weakness. His eyes, dark brown and sharp, were fixed on her not with pity, but with something steadier, heavier. Lyra's voice came out like a blade drawn too fast. You should not be here. This is the cliff of silence. Only the condemned may stand upon it. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Funny, I didn't see any sign saying humans not allowed. Her jaw clenched, rage bubbling through her. Despair. Do not mock this place. This is where the dishonored return their souls to the wind. My people expect it of me. If you had any honor, you would leave me to it. He took another step closer, his cane clicking against the crystalline stone. Honor? I've heard a lot about your people's version of it. But where I come from, honor doesn't mean dying because someone else said you should. It means standing back up after the world knocks you down. Her claws curled tightly, scraping against the stone ledge. His words made no sense. They cut across everything she had been taught since childhood. You don't understand, human. I survived when I should not have. I lived while the rest of my unit was slaughtered. That shame will follow me until I cast myself into the abyss. My people will never forgive me. Marcus stopped then, only a few steps away. His voice was calm, but each word landed with deliberate weight. You think your people want you gone? Maybe some of them do. But what about your squad, the ones who fell? Do you really think they'd want you to throw away the life they fought to protect? Her breath caught. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came. She had thought of her comrades endlessly, replaying their screams, their final stands, the way their bodies fell. In her mind, she had failed them. But never once had she asked herself what they would want for her. The question shook something loose. Marcus shifted his cane, his body leaning slightly forward as though offering her an unseen hand. I've been on too many battlefields. I've carried men out who didn't make it, heard their last words. And not one of them ever said, make sure you die too. They wanted us to live, to keep fighting, to keep remembering them. You, still breathing? That's not shame. That's their legacy carried forward. The wind howled between them, carrying dust and the faint echo of far-off horns from the city below. For a long moment, all Lyra could do was stare. His words did not erase her shame, but they cracked it, like a hammer against glass. Her voice finally broke free, hoarse. You speak as if survival is a victory. For the Veari, it is only proof of weakness. Marcus's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. Then maybe that's the difference between us. Humans, we don't see weakness and survival. We see defiance. You think the enemy wants you alive? No, they'd rather you be gone. Every breath you take is proof they didn't finish the job. Something in that thought, simple, stubborn, human, pierced through the storm raging inside. She had never considered survival an act of rebellion. To live, even in defeat, as a way of denying the enemy's satisfaction. It was a perspective so alien, so unthinkable, that her mind reeled. Marcus straightened, grimacing slightly at the pain in his leg, but his eyes never wavered. You can jump if you want. I can't stop you. But if you do, know this, you won't. Just be ending your shame. You'll be ending the chance to carry their memory forward. You'll be letting the Carracks win twice, once when they killed your squad, and again when they drove you here. The abyss seemed to roar louder, pulling at her once more. But his words pressed against her chest like a weight, heavier than gravity. She could almost feel her comrades' faces, hear their voices in the wind, not condemning her, not calling her coward, just present. Her feet shifted. She stepped back from the edge. Marcus exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing. For the first time, he allowed a flicker of gentleness to reach his voice. That's it. One step back is all it takes. You don't have to know what comes next yet. Just don't let this cliff decide for you. The moons of Ural drifted across the night sky as Lyra and Marcus sat side by side on the stone platform. The cliff of silence was not meant for sitting, it was meant for endings. Yet here they were, suspended between ritual death and the fragile chance of a new beginning. Lyra hugged her knees to her chest, her violet eyes distant, gazing out over the canyon. The winds tore past them in constant waves, their sound an eternal reminder of the generations who had leapt before. To her people, this place was sacred. To Marcus, it was just a ledge. And yet, by being here, he had transformed its meaning. Entirely the silence stretched on, broken only by the whistle of the wind. Marcus said nothing at first. He didn't press her. He didn't demand she thank him for interrupting. He just sat there, leaning on his cane, letting the night breathe around them. That quietness unnerved her more than anything. Veyari leaders always spoke. They judged, they condemned, they reminded you of your place. Humans, apparently, they simply waited. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was raw, almost a whisper. Among the Veyari, survival without victory is the worst dishonor. A soldier who lives when their unit dies is nothing but a hollow shell. We are taught from childhood, better the fire, better the blade, better the void, than to live without honor. Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable. So you're telling me you made it through hell. You're breathing when no one else could, and that makes you worthless? She bared her teeth, more in pain than anger. Yes, to you, it may sound strange. To me, it is truth. My people will never see me as anything but a coward, a ghost among the living. Marcus leaned back, his gaze drifting up to the twin moons. For a while he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words were slow, deliberate. Where I come from, survival isn't shame, it's proof. Proof you endured when others couldn't. Proof you carried their sacrifice forward. We don't dishonor the dead by breathing. We honor them by making sure they're not forgotten. Lyra's claws dug into her palms. Empty words. You twist weakness into strength because you fear facing your own dishonor. But Marcus only smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe we just don't let shame dictate the value of our lives. Her breath hitched. No Veyari would have said such a thing aloud, let alone believed it. And yet, hearing it spoken with such quiet certainty unsettled her. A strange warmth pressed against her chest, a tiny spark against the crushing weight of her despair. Marcus shifted slightly. The movement pained. Tell me about them, he said at last. She frowned. Who? Your unit, he answered simply. The ones you think you dishonored. Tell me their names. Her throat tightened. Her first instinct was to refuse. In Veyari culture, the names of the dead were spoken only in ritual chants or during mourning ceremonies, never in casual conversation. To speak them here, in front of an alien no less, would be unthinkable. But Marcus's gaze held steady, not prying, not demanding, just waiting. And slowly her lips parted. She spoke the first name, a warrior whose laughter had once filled the barracks. Then another, the squad leader who had carried the banner into battle. Then another, and another, until the names flowed like water breaking a dam. With each one her voice cracked, her body shaking as the memories she had buried clawed to the surface, and Marcus. He listened. Not with distant politeness, not with the detachment of an outsider. He repeated each name softly after her, as if etching them into his own memory. Each time, he gave a small nod, a gesture of recognition, as though saying, I hear them. I carry them too. By the end, her face was wet with tears she had not permitted herself to shed since the battle. Her voice broke entirely, her chest heaving. She had been taught to hold grief in silence, to never let weakness show. Yet, Here, on this cliff with a human by her side, she allowed herself to weep. When the last name left her lips, Marcus spoke quietly. You carry them now, not as shame, as legacy. Lyra's breath trembled. The word legacy felt strange, alien, but it resonated. For the first time since she had crawled from the ruins of that battlefield, she did not feel only the crushing weight of disgrace. She felt something else, something lighter. Her claws loosened, her hands falling into her lap. The wind still roared, still tugged at her clothes, but they no longer sounded like a call to the void. They sounded like whispers, like the voices of those she had named. The days that followed were unlike anything Lyra had expected. She had thought that stepping back from the cliff would only prolong the inevitable. That shame would claw at her until she finally returned to throw herself into the abyss. Yet, something had shifted. Marcus stayed close, though never in the smothering way of her kin. He didn't guard her, didn't lecture her, didn't treat her like a broken blade that needed reforging. He simply existed near her. Sometimes he limped beside her through the corridors of the Allied outpost, speaking casually to others, laughing when the occasion arose. Sometimes he sat in silence, repairing his battered gear, humming strange human songs under his breath. Too. Lyra, his behavior was maddening. Humans carried their scars openly. They laughed even with death still clinging to them. They seemed to treat survival itself as a form of rebellion. The Veari saw scars as weakness. Marcus wore his as though they were medals. One evening, after watching him drag his damaged leg through the camp for the 100th time, she finally confronted him. Why? She demanded, blocking his path. He raised an eyebrow. Why what? Why do you fight so hard to keep me from ending myself? Why waste words, waste time, when I mean nothing to you? I am not of your people. I am not even respected among my own. Marcus leaned on his cane, studying her with those maddeningly calm eyes. Because I've seen what despair does. I've lost good men stronger than me, who gave up long before the enemy finished them. I couldn't save them. But maybe. He paused, his jaw tightening before softening again. Maybe I can save you. The words hit harder than any strike. Lyra's throat tightened, though she masked it with a hiss. Humans, you are reckless. You cling to life even when it has no meaning. He smiled faintly, a crooked grin that seemed carved from defiance. Or maybe we're just too stubborn to let anyone else decide when our story ends. His answer unsettled her more than any accusation. For her people, life without honor was a hollow existence. Yet Marcus spoke of life as something inherently valuable, something worth holding on to even when meaning seemed absent. That night, she found herself unable to sleep. His words played in her head, weaving around the voices of her fallen comrades. Too stubborn to let anyone else decide when our story ends. The following day, curiosity overcame her. She sat beside him as he mended his gear. You speak of survival as though it is defiance, she said cautiously. Explain. Marcus didn't look up. Simple. Every enemy that tries to kill you wants you gone. Every scar is proof they failed. So long as you're breathing, you're winning. Doesn't matter if you're limping, broken, or half dead. You're still here. That's victory enough, her brow furrowed. Victory? No. To the Veari, true victory is glorious. The Tiowin no to the Veari, true victory is glorious, the victory is glorious. Last strike, the final roar. To crawl away breathing is pathetic. Marcus finally glanced at her, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Funny thing is, pathetic doesn't stop you from waking up the next morning. She stared at him, caught between outrage and reluctant amusement. Against all logic, she found herself almost laughing. The sound died in her throat, but her chest felt lighter, as though a chain had loosened. Over the next days, she observed him more closely. She saw how he treated the wounded not with scorn, but with camaraderie. He sat with soldiers who had lost limbs, trading jokes until they smiled again. He spoke to commanders with the same ease as he did to low-ranking recruits. He carried no shame in his limp, nor in the way his hands sometimes shook when he cleaned. His weapon, humans, she realized, did not see weakness the way the Veari did. They saw survival as strength, scars as stories, pain as proof of endurance. One evening, after long silence, she whispered, "Your ways are strange, human, Marcus." Chuckled softly. "Yeah, I've heard that before." Her claws flexed nervously. She hated admitting it, but the truth gnawed at her. And yet, "I find myself wondering if your way is not weaker, but stronger." He looked at her then, truly looked, and she felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. His smile was small, but genuine. That's the thing about our way. You don't have to believe it all at once. You just try it, one day at a time. For the first time, Lyra didn't recoil from the thought of tomorrow. She didn't imagine the cliff when she closed her eyes. Instead, she imagined Marcus's voice, stubborn and steady, reminding her that survival itself was a kind of defiance. The sun's light had long faded, but the gentle glow of the human ship's interior panels illuminated the chamber where Vela now sat. She wasn't on the edge anymore, not of the platform, not of her thoughts, not of her existence. She sat on a wide observation bench beside Ethan, a steaming cup of something he called tea between her hands. It was warm, fragrant, and oddly soothing. As if humanity had found a way to distill calm into liquid. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt calm. For hours after Ethan had pulled her from the precipice, they had spoken. Or rather, Ethan had spoken, and Vela had listened. Humans, she realized, had an odd way of talking not simply with their words, but with their presence. Ethan didn't demand answers. He didn't demand she explain her shame or her failures. He simply told stories. Stories of Earth. He spoke of a world filled with chaos and contradiction, of oceans that covered most of the planet, fierce and endless, of mountains sharp enough to split the sky, of forests teeming with creatures both beautiful and deadly. He told her of storms that could flatten cities, of diseases that once wiped out millions, of wars that carved deep scars into human history. Yet, every tale was laced with survival, with stubbornness, with an almost laughable refusal to stop living. At first, Vela thought he was exaggerating, but the quiet gravity in his voice told her otherwise. "You see," Ethan had said, his gaze fixed on the distant stars through the observation window, "my people weren't supposed to make it this far. By galactic standards, Earth should have been the tomb of our species, but we didn't die. We didn't quit. We took the pain and we built something out of it." His words gnawed at the wall she had built around herself. In her culture, failure marked the end. Honor demanded silence after shame. She had been ready to fulfill that expectation. But here sat a human, telling her that failure was not an end, but a beginning. That scars weren't disfigurements, but maps of survival. That broken things could still be made whole. And for the first time, Vela wanted to believe it. The following days were strange. She had expected the human to discard her after saving her life, but instead, he made space for her aboard his vessel. He treated her not as a burden, but as a guest. She was clumsy, unaccustomed to human customs, or even the gravity settings, but Ethan never mocked her. If she stumbled, he steadied her. If she fell silent, he didn't press her. Most surprising of all, he asked her opinion. When calibrating the ship's navigation array, he had turned to her and asked, "You know the Avalori Quadrant better than—" "I do. Should we plot a course through the drift channels or the outer rings?" No one had asked her opinion since she had disgraced herself. And yet, This human acted as though her knowledge mattered. It stirred something in her chest, something she had buried, but her shame lingered, coiling like a shadow. One evening she confessed it, her voice shaking as she told Ethan what had brought her to the edge: the failed mission, the loss of her squad, the disgrace that had hollowed her. She expected judgment, perhaps even disgust. Instead, Ethan only listened. When she finished, he said softly, "You think their loss was your failure. But if they could speak to you now, do you think they'd want you to throw your life away too?" The question pierced her deeper than any blade. She had no answer. He leaned closer then, his voice low but steady. "You want to honor them? Love? Carry their memory forward. Be the one who remembers. That's how humans do it. We don't let our dead vanish, we carry them with us. Every step, every breath. That's survival. That's victory." Her eyes burned, and though her species rarely wept, moisture gathered at the corners of her vision. For the first time since the disaster, she let herself grieve. In the days that followed, Vela's posture shifted. The weight was still there, but lighter. She began assisting Ethan more directly, studying his strange technology, even laughing an alien sound in her throat at some of his clumsy jokes. She wasn't healed. Not yet. But she wasn't broken beyond repair either. On the 10th day aboard his vessel, Ethan found her standing at the observation deck again, the same place where despair had nearly claimed her. But this time, she wasn't looking down. She was looking outward, to the stars.